when you give your children to Caesar for an education, don't be surprised when they bow at Caesar. When we stop relying on God and start relying on government, what we're actually saying is God is bankrupt and he needs a government bailout. There is no such thing as vouchers without government control. They just simply don't exist. The federal government has zero power, authority, or even duty to education.
Your organization is known worldwide, and we certainly appreciate every facet that you do.
I do believe in what you're doing because I've seen it in my family.
I'm so excited about all the things that, Robert, you guys do with Classical Conversations. It's been a huge blessing for our family.
Grateful for the work at Classical Conversations. You're a leader and you have been in this movement for a long time.
We love Classical Conversations.
I do feel like I have a debt of gratitude to you, your family, all of CC for just the fruit that has come from CC.
I appreciate all that you guys do, both through this wonderful podcast and also through Classical Conversations, which I am convinced is the best education resource out there. Thank you very much for all that you do for the cause of Christ and for our families and for our children. Really, really appreciate it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another informative podcast at the Refining Rhetoric Podcast. I am here with a special guest, KrisAnne Hall. This is part of our School Choice Week podcast series. For those who don't know her, she has her bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Blackburn College and her Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida College of Law. She was a U.S. Army Military Intelligence Russian linguist. I can't even say the name. And later worked as a prosecutor for the state of Florida for nearly a decade. She is really part of this kind of Liberty First nonprofit firm, really defending civil rights, going back to the Constitution. She is a most sought-after constitutional speaker. KrisAnne, thank you so much for joining the Refining Rhetoric podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you are a constitutional lawyer. What does that mean? Like, what do you do that a typical lawyer is not doing?
Well, it's more like being a doctor and being a neurosurgeon, right? So I do everything that every other lawyer does. My practice doesn't just do constitutional law. So I also do corporate law. I do contracts. I do immigration law. Constitutional law is a portion of what I do in that nonprofit aspect that we help people retain or defend their natural rights when agents of the government or laws of the government are somehow interfering or trying to supersede their natural rights.
Yeah, so what the founders had in mind with the Constitution and where we are today seems to be diametrically opposed in many aspects of American life. And what does the Constitution say about the federal government's responsibility in education?
Nothing. Which means the federal government has zero power, authority, or even duty to education. Our Constitution is written not as a list of things that the government can't do, but as a list of things that they can do. And those who drafted and ratified the Constitution were very clear that if what the government wants to do or is trying to do is not on the specific list of things that we've allowed them to do, then they are actually prohibited from doing that. And then the 10th Amendment tells us whatever has not been specifically delegated in an enumerated list we have in the Constitution to the federal government, that power is then reserved with the states and the people.
So I know Trump said that he's getting rid of the Department of Education, which is kind of true, but he's just kind of made different departments now control all of those laws and distributing the funds. Like, why hasn't there been any lawsuits, or why is the federal government continually allowed to violate the Constitution that we all have agreed to operate under?
Well, because people like free stuff. And when you get free stuff, when the government's handing out money and you think the government's giving you money and not realizing that the government's actually stealing the money from you first and then handing it back to you as a gift, that is a very powerful influence. And I actually have online American history classes where I show the history of the Constitution that goes back to the year 1014. That's how our Constitution was developed over 700 years before it ever even landed on this continent. And that history of human nature, human behavior, and government shows us that whenever government hands out free stuff, people don't ask where the free stuff comes from, and they don't ask how much it's going to cost them later. And that's really where we are today. We have been trained into a very fundamental ignorance about the Constitution, about the role and duty of the people, about the role and duty of the states, and the very, very limited authority of the federal government. Deliberately denied truth about that, even in our textbooks, that now we come to expect certain things from government that simply are not constitutionally allowed. So you have two things to overcome. You have to overcome the allure of free money, and you have to overcome a misconception at best on what is really the role of government anyway.
Well, we'll definitely be talking about free money here in a minute. In my new book, Woke and Weaponized, Chapter 3, I start with a quote from Thomas Jefferson, the Virginia statute for establishing religious freedom, and I'd like to get your comment on it. He said, "Almighty God hath created the mind free, that all attempts to influence by temporal punishment or burdens, aka taxation, my words, or by civil incapacitations tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness." So what was he saying there, and how do we see that maybe in today's culture in America?
Well, if you're going to sort of bottom line that, what Jefferson is really saying is when we set aside a knowledge and virtue and a dedication to the rights that have been given to us by God, and we trade those things for, how do I put this? Just when we trade those things for things of comfort, right? What ends up happening is we cling closer to the comfort than we do to the rights. And then we become hypocrites because we'll demand that our rights on this side be handled, but then create a different and opposing consequence in an exact same situation in order to keep the comfort. And I hope that makes sense. So basically what we do is we trade our rights for comfort, and that allows us to be to have a situational morality.
Yeah, so we've got these Minnesota Somalian daycare centers that have been getting grants from the United States, federal government or state governments, and that's money to educate the kids because, of course, kids have got to be educated. Talk to us about how these kind of government programs in Minnesota have incentivized all this fraud that I think $9 billion that we know of today, and probably even more in other states.
Oh, yeah. Well, just don't be operating under any delusion that this is something that is reserved to Minnesota or California or even just, what political ideologues would call leftist states. I mean, I live in Florida, and that's not a leftist state. There's corruption in every single state. I don't care where you are. Corruption exists when accountability is ignored or decreased. And what has happened in our constitutional republic is that through our ignorance, through our apathy, through our seeking the free stuff, we have forgotten that the federal government is limited and defined. So, and by the way, we've been intentionally not taught the meaning of true phrases and clauses, the true meaning of phrases and clauses in the Constitution. So, number one in your question is this. The federal government has no authority to hand money out in the form of welfare or subsidies. That is not a power that has been delegated to the federal government. And as a matter of fact, It was a power that was specifically denied to the federal government. The reason that the federal government engages in that, if you just sort of set aside that whole we like free stuff, human nature thing, is that we've allowed our education system to educate us into ignorance about these limitations and allowed our institutions to redefine meanings. So the general welfare clause is what people say, oh, well, the government can hand out subsidies and money and fund things because of the general welfare clause. Only that's not what the general welfare clause means. The general welfare is not about welfare money. It's not about the government providing welfare. It's not even for the government to provide comfort. The general welfare clause is a clause that even dates back to the Articles of Confederation as an instruction to the federal government that whenever they engage in a duty that's enumerated, like war, peace, negotiation, that sort of thing, treaties, whenever they engaged in truly delegated powers, they must exercise those powers with the understanding that the general application of that exercise of power must be equal among the states. The General Welfare Clause means that you can't engage in a treaty that benefits one state and detriments another. So any treaty, any foreign trade agreement, anything that happens in the federal realm must equally benefit the union as a whole, not playing favorites. That's what the General Welfare Clause means. It has nothing to do with the individual because the federal government was never supposed to have jurisdiction or influence or control over an individual. Any governmental authority that was to happen on the individual was to happen at the state level. So problem number one, the federal government shouldn't be doing this. And when the federal government does this, oversight and accountability is next to impossible. That's how you get corruption. If there's going to be any kind of subsidies or welfare given for people in need, that has to happen at the state and local levels. And at the state and local levels where the people have closer accountability to their government, greater supervision over their government, that corruption is harder to achieve.
So does the federal government kind of get around that by giving the money to the states directly and then saying, well, it's the states that are allocating the money and we're just providing an equal distribution based on the last census? Is that how they try to get around it?
Well, it's not really even getting around it. They actually extort the power from the states to do that through money. So just like people like free money, states like free money. And so over the years through the miseducation, because most people don't realize that there is a political hierarchy in our constitutional republic. And it's the states that are a higher power over the federal government, not the other way around. The federal government is actually a creation of the states. You can't have a creation more powerful than its creator. So the states are the supervising power over the federal government. And we have been denied that education. Most people don't know. If they've been taught, they forget. Or if they know, they haven't forgot, they'll set aside that understanding in order to get the money. And so you hear people say all the time, follow the money. That's really it. So the love of money is the root of all evil. And it's how our states have lost their sovereignty and lost their authority by trading it to the federal government for trinkets, really.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of Esau selling his birthright for a bowl of soup.
Pretty much.
In many aspects. So talk to like the federal level. I think most listeners, at least conservatives or Republicans, would agree with that. But then we come down to the state level. And of course, each state has different constitutions that have allocated certain powers to it. But do the states stick to their constitutions, generally speaking? And just because the state constitution allows them to do something, does that still have to comply with natural law and the ideas that founded our country?
Well, that's a pretty big package to unwrap. So let's sort of start from a 30,000-foot view and work our way down. The state constitutions are like the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution creates the federal government, specifically listing the power and the duties of the federal government. State constitutions do the same thing for the state and local levels. So the state governments and the local governments have no authority to act unless the Constitution authorizes them to do those acts. People have more control over their state constitutions, and so from a legal political aspect and from a constitutional republic aspect, the states have more powers that generally reside within their purview in a state constitution. So we would never, well, let me rephrase that. We were never supposed to allow the federal government to engage in the same activities as the states. So education is reserved to the states, police powers reserved to the states, land management reserved to the states, commerce that happens within the state is reserved to the states, and all legal actions that are contained within the state borders are reserved to that state. Now, that's not an exhaustive list. That's just an example. But as if you can just sort of envision that you have the borders of your state and everything that happens within those borders, that is all governed by the state. The federal government, according to the Constitution, has no jurisdiction over anything that happens within those borders of your state, not constitutionally speaking anyway. Remember, we're operating unconstitutionally at that level at this point. So the Constitution of the state limits the state and local governments for their powers. Now, can the states exercise powers that are not granted to it by the Constitution? Well, the answer to that is a little bit, I don't mean to be obtuse or tricky, but the reality is they can, but that exercise of power will not be lawful exercise. So when a government exercises power that's not lawful, not authorized by the Constitution, it's incumbent upon the people to be a check and balance for that. So what the people tolerate becomes their silent consent to unconstitutional, unauthorized power. Now, it doesn't create authority, but it can create the appearance of authority in the sense that the state and the local governments will exercise that power without opposition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I volunteer for a lot of nonprofits and different organizations, and I might not be the president or a high offering person, but because I'm willing to do things and I do things, then it's like I can sometimes operate as, an officer of an organization, even though I don't actually have those powers assigned to me, just because I'm doing things and the people like what I'm doing. And so, yeah, people's consent to be governed, if we can give them a little bit of free stuff and keep them quiet with bread and circus, then they're not going to fight back. And if you can make them fat people don't tend to rebel because they've gotten everything
Right.
provided to them
Well,
by the state.
from a historical and cultural and behavioral perspective, it's comfort, right? So people will tolerate a lot of things to remain comfortable. It's why Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, just to be clear. It's not like physically fat, but like
no, I get that. But even physically fat has to do with comfort as well. So what we have, as Jefferson remarked in the Declaration of Independence, he said people will suffer evil as long as evil is sufferable, right? Which means that we are a people that are slow to move and thick-necked, right? We don't want to change. We don't want to do anything to overturn the apple cart, disrupt things, rock the boat, as long as we can tolerate the conditions in which we live in. It's more comfortable to be tolerable than being thriving and prosperous is worth in discomfort, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and actually I think B.F. Skinner, the psychiatrist or psychologist who's a lot of our education is based around, did research on animals. And basically, we've been conditioned through our public school system to even tolerate more than maybe we would naturally by behavioral controls where, going against the grain is frowned upon and you're, exiled outside of community. So we've even got that sort of natural maybe mentality that most people have of not rocking the boat being exercised through psychological means through K-12. So that makes it easy for us to be controlled. Now I know like HSLDA right now, I think, and some other groups are trying to push for a federal recognition of homeschool diplomas because some, I guess, maybe trying to end around states that might not be giving homeschoolers diplomas or allowing us to, be more restrictive. I don't know the actual language of the laws, but I don't know if you have an opinion on that or not, or just something that you haven't considered.
I'm not familiar with that, to be honest with you. I would be kind of surprised to hear that HSLDA has signed on to that, because HSLDA has been very firm in their position that the federal government and no government should have anything to do with homeschooling. Maybe it's the diploma recognition. The problem is that I'm slightly confused by that, because I already know the military accepts homeschool diplomas. I'm not sure where the federal government is not accepting homeschool diplomas at this point. So I would wonder why we would even need that. And the position has always been, at least my experience working with HSLDA and also my understanding both personally as a former homeschool parent. My son is now married, and I know that we're going to be homeschooling grandchildren when they come along as well. But also as a constitutional attorney and a corporate attorney, any government permission comes with condition. So we start looking for government to sanction our homeschool diplomas. Government's not going to be happy doing that unless they have control. And so if you're looking for government to sanction homeschool diplomas, it'd be the same as looking for the government to fund your homeschool, which means funding from the government on your homeschool will require you to meet their standards. If you don't meet their standards, then they can withdraw their funding. And that's how it works. So I think we all understand, at least on some part, that money from government always comes with strings. If we just sort of bottom shelf that. The reality is anything that comes from government comes with strings. So whether it's money or permission or approval, none of that can come unless the government has control. So I'd be professionally, legally, and morally opposed to seeking any kind of sanction or permission from the government for homeschool.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at the bill too closely to understand quite what they're doing, but it does seem a little sus, as the kids like to say these days, that we're looking to the federal government that shouldn't be in education at all to now bless the hard work of millions of homeschooling parents such as ourselves.
Let me interject for just a second, because like I said, I am very confused by the fact why we need a bill, because the military has been accepting homeschool students for a long time. Public universities that take federal funding accept homeschool education. Federal employers take homeschool student graduates. So I'm really wondering if the bill is a solution looking for a problem. A solution looking for a problem that's not even necessary so that the control can be exercised. Or is this just another backdoor ploy to get federal money into homeschooling and exercise the greatest control ever?
I know HSLDA is against that. It's HR 6392, and according to, and I don't want to linger on this too much, I'm obviously friends with a lot of people at HSLDA. Don't always agree with everything they do, and I doubt they always agree with everything that I do. So that's fine. We can still be friends. I guess it says HSLDA deals with hundreds of cases each year all over the country in which homeschool graduates are denied employment, entry to trade schools, and other opportunities based on the erroneous claim that they are not high school graduates. The Homeschool Graduation Recognition Act will eliminate ambiguity, prevent ongoing misinterpretation, and ensure equal treatment for homeschool graduates by clarifying that homeschool graduates meet the definition of high school graduates for federal student aid purposes, says HSLDA
There
President
you go.
Jim Mason.
That's it right there. Federal student aid. You found it right there. It's all about the money. And you know what else you read in that bill? Didn't it say to clarify, right? To clarify that homeschool meets the same standards as public school, qualifies in the same way. Well, how do you make sure that something meets the same standards that is equal to? Because then I was just saying the equal to. Homeschool is equal to formal education. Well, you've got to have a checkbox somewhere, don't you? Somebody's got to create that checkbox, because there are plenty of people, and you and I both know, being in the homeschool world, there are plenty of parents out there who claim they're homeschooling who are doing nothing at all, just because there are bad apples in every world. And so now what you're going to have is a situation where we have in law, we call bad facts make bad law. So the next thing you know, somebody's going to say, okay, well, you're giving equal status to a homeschooler whose parents did absolutely nothing to teach their children and just printed out a diploma on a printer with the same academic standard and testing that my child had to take in a public school. Where is that equality? And that's where the door opens for government control.
It looks like they're trying to fix it. Right now, homeschool students are under some rule that says who are not high school graduates that allow them to get it, and they're fixing that language once and for all by removing this discriminatory header in the Higher Education Act. So interesting stuff. So you've started hitting on the money and the states and the educational rights. So you live in Florida.
I do.
Florida kind of was the second big state, second red state after Arizona to adopt this universal school choice idea. And, we're going to steal money from Pharaoh, and we're going to empower parents, and all of these good talking points, which I've thoroughly, dismembered through all sorts of different podcasts and articles and stuff. But what's your point? What's your point of view? I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I'm guessing that you maybe sympathize with my point of view.
It's not really my opinion. It's a matter of historical fact. It's a matter of legal fact. It's a matter of political fact. It is undebatable. It is indisputable. There is no such thing as vouchers without government control. They just simply don't exist. What happens is that the money that is given, and the whole illusion, it follows the student and not the school. That's an illusion itself, and an even more dangerous one than if it went to the school. And I can explain that later. But the reality is, just because the government isn't exercising a power doesn't mean they don't have the authority to exercise the power. And quite often, government will choose not to exercise a power until the people are appropriately addicted to whatever it is they're being given and can't live without it. Once they get to the point where they can't live without it, then the government will start exercising that power incrementally until the people are willing to sell their principles in order to keep the money. And we're watching that happen now. Everything that I warned was going to happen is happening with these vouchers. And the sad thing is that the state of Florida, even though we have this whole, we actually paved the road for government control of private school before our school choice program started. In 2007, right before 2007, the state government took control of private scholarships going to private schools. which allowed the state to audit private schools who take private scholarships, all in the guise of we can't let private schools not use money where it's supposed to be used. So we invited government into the private realm on private scholarships. That's how you get the Florida statute that controls the IDEA scholarships and the corporate scholarships for special needs. Then in 2007 in Florida, most people don't realize that the Florida legislatures passed a law called the Ethics in Education Act, which required all private schools and government schools, right? So all government schools and all private schools who take these now statutory scholarships that were private scholarships to submit to the Florida Department of Education an ethics and education policy for the school. And the ethics and education policy, and this is for Christian schools, private schools, any private school that takes this corporate money, and now any school that takes these vouchers, they have to have an ethics and education policy. The ethics and education policy that has been handed out by the Florida Department of Education says even to biblical Christian schools, you cannot teach a single source curriculum, meaning you cannot teach the Bible is the source of all truth. You cannot teach creationism. You have to teach evolution as well. You cannot interfere with a child's desire to express themselves in their autonomy, meaning, they have to be able to choose their gender. You cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation. And all of this is applied to even Christian schools. And someone will ask, well, how could that be? It's not being enforced. Who knows why the government's not enforcing this? But the fact that they're not enforcing it doesn't negate the fact that the law gives them the power to do it. You just need the right governor, the right attorney general, the right Department of Education to happen at the right time, any one of those things. And the next thing you know, hundreds of Christian schools are going to be told, you have to give up this money or you need to fall into line. And one thing that we learned from COVID is another thing that I had been warning, because most people say, well, when they start telling me I can't do this, that's when I'll say I won't take this money anymore. But we learned from COVID that the government will say, okay, but now you have to pay back what we've already paid you. So all the people who inadvertently and mistakenly violated the provisions for the COVID employee benefit things that they were handing out, the PPP, they were not only told they can't have more money, they were told they had to pay back the money with fines and interest. So that's part of the problem. When we said that the vouchers follow the parents and not the schools, what the parents are doing is mingling that money with their own finances, which means now the government has the authority to audit your personal finances to make sure you're spending that money on education and not spending it on something else. So all that power actually exists, and it's already coming in. I don't know most of the homeschooler community watches what goes on around the world. And right now, there's a big explosion in the homeschool communities and in the private school communities in the state of Texas, because the Texas voucher program that works just like the one in Florida has money going to Islamic madrasas, the Muslim schools. So the parents in Texas are outraged that the Muslim education system, which is teaching Sharia law, because that's their religion, just like a Christian school would teach biblical covenant law, the parents and the members of the community are outraged that that money is going to these Muslim schools. They are actually now begging the state of Texas to discriminate on where vouchers are paid and to regulate the education associated with vouchers. So
Of course.
the homeschool parents in the community are asking for the government regulation that's going to come, and that's going to happen all over the country.
Wokeandweaponized.com. Go there right now and get my new book. It outlines the history of American education and why the current public school system can't be reformed. It must be replaced. And this is a well-documented book. Thank you, Dr. Benjamin Merkel, for writing the foreword. And as Sean Ryan said, if you're a parent, read this book. Go to wokeandweaponized.com today. Yeah, we in our new book, Woke and Weaponized, that Alex Newman and I wrote together, go look at Sweden. And Sweden took about 19 years from starting school choice to eliminating homeschooling altogether and ripping kids from their parents' arms out of airports and airlines when they were trying to flee the country so that they could educate their kids in the way they should go. And I've been warning as well, is that it's not the homeschool kid who's learning that's going to be the issue. It's going to be the Muslims. It's going to be these like Islamic cities that are popping up that now the conservative taxpayers are paying for their jihad schools, and they're funneling money back to Iran, just like the Somalian daycares are funneling money back to the Democrat Party and to different things. Then we've got CCP, the Communist Party of China, through intermediaries. They actually tried to buy IMG Academy, the biggest private school in the world in Florida, and they are buying up schools faster than they can, as fast as they can in all of these school choice states, so that they can reap these free dollars at the states coming out. So is this really, we're being told that this is empower parents. It doesn't sound like the reality on the ground is that's what's going to happen. So what are some of those predictions that you've made, and have you been surprised at how quickly they're coming to pass? Because that's almost been my surprise, that things that took the communists in Sweden 20 years to do, our Republican legislators are doing in 2 years.
Well, let me just say that I have been issuing these warnings now for nearly 2 decades. So it may appear to be quick, but this has been coming through the pipeline now for almost 20 years. Because I have been warning now, this is 2026, so for 16 years, that these kinds of things were coming with the vouchers, because people have been asking for vouchers for longer than we've actually had them. And so part of the problem is that government doesn't give you money because they love you. Government doesn't give you money because they want to empower you. That may be the political rhetoric, but the reality is government gives money so they can have power. And that's the reality. And nobody can argue otherwise, because all of history creates that self-evident truth. It's an indisputable self-evident truth. And the reality is that seizing the language is how people are manipulated. And you are right to identify that this is a bipartisan thing. Why? Because government wants power. It's not about the one political party wanting power and another political party not wanting power. All political parties are government, and all government wants power. I think it was Thomas Paine who said, and I'm pretty sure it was Thomas Paine who said that you should make no mistake, men want to govern. They may be benevolent governors, but they will rule over you. And so what we have to know in an electionary process, the same with a monarchical process, that every administration brings a new ideology. So you can have a benevolent administration who loves you and wants the best for you, but that administration will hand over power to the next one. And maybe it's not so benevolent, but the reality is the power that's handed over never decreases. It always increases. So that's an inescapable truth, that you will never have the same ruler all the time, and power always expands exponentially, which is why our constitutional republic started with government having very limited and defined power. And so what we What we really, really have here is a situation where we've been duped. We need school choice. No, we don't. We already have school choice. America has school choice. This is not Germany or Sweden yet, where you go to prison for trying to homeschool your parents. We don't lack school choice in America. We lack parental priorities because as a self-employed person who, everybody thinks, oh, she's a lawyer, she's rich. Well, do your research. Most lawyers are not rich. We are actually the lowest paid profession commensurate to the cost of our education around. What you see are the top 1.5% who make big money, right? Especially constitutional lawyers. So we do all our work for free. What kind of money is coming in?
Nobody wants to pay to hear about the Constitution.
Right? No, and nobody wants to have the right pay to have a lawyer anyway, because don't get me started on that propaganda. But the reality is we have been duped into believing that the American dream is living in, not actually even owning anymore, but living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a 2-car garage and 3 cars in the driveway, a flat screen TV in every room, a cell phone in every hand, and the 11th commandment, thou shalt have a vacation every year, built on debt, right? So the American dream boils down to the word debt. The reality is the American dream is the ability to have independence, to live your life and to raise your children according to the dictates of your conscience. We have that in America. School choice, as our legislators define it, does not give you more liberty. It gives you less liberty. And nobody can tell me, well, what about underprivileged parents? You can find in any decade of our history any number of people, highly successful people, who will tell you, I had a single parent who believed in my education, who worked hard, who sacrificed, put me through private school. I went to a Christian school where the school gave me scholarships, and I got my education that way. In America, there are innumerable ways to get private scholarships not stuck to government money. And people do it all the time. Not only that, I am a Christian. I have done a lot of work, legal work, ministry work. I've been a missionary. I've represented churches since 2007. The problem with our education system is not that we don't have enough government in education. The problem in our education system is that we don't have enough private funding in our education system. And if we had churches who had schools that weren't seeking government money, if we had business owners who believed in the educational process, who gave scholarships without government ties, then we would solve this problem as it exists in its places the right way. But government is never the right way. When you give your children to Caesar for an education, don't be surprised when they bow at Caesar.
Amen. Preach. So I agree with you 100%. So one of the things that people will say, well, they're actually getting them out of Caesar's footprint because we're pulling them out of public school, and now we're able to afford, private school or homeschooling, and that's actually getting them farther from Caesar's reach. You seem to believe that is a fallacy, as do I. So why do you think that's an inaccurate description about what's going on?
If you're using Caesar's money, Caesar's still educating your children. And that also comes down to a misconception that we have in America. It based quite interestingly on a truth at the foundation of America. So the truth at the foundation of America is tax dollars belong to the people, right? That's our money. The reality is, in our postmodern world, tax dollars don't belong to the people. They belong to government. And if we actually are honest about the way we speak about tax dollars, we will see that evidence. We refer to tax dollars as government revenue. Revenue is the product of the holder and is the property of the holder. Government is fully under this belief that once it is labeled tax dollars, it's government money. When your public school teachers get a paycheck, does it say paid by the people of the state? No. It comes from the government. Not only that, government tax refunds, government giving you money, their money. Anytime you get a tax credit, what is that? That's not the government letting you keep your money. That's the government saying you don't have to pay us what belongs to us. So a voucher, an educational credit, this is all the government saying, okay, we're entitled to this money, but we like this program and we want to keep you happy, so we'll let you keep our money. It never leaves their possession. It never stops being their property. They're just allowing you to use it. And as long as it is kept legally, by the way, in the eyes of the law, as their property, they control it, whether it's in your bank account or whether it's in theirs. So don't fall under some kind of illusion that the government's doing you a favor by giving you money to leave government school. Number one, that flies in the face of every logical, critical thinking aspect you can. Government's not going to give you money to escape them. Government is giving you money to expand their reach into your home and expand their control.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, whoever pays, like, it's called public school because the public is funding it. Like, that's why charter schools, which are run by private organizations, are still public schools. So your private school, if it's funded by the public, is now a public school. And that's what I've been trying to explain to people is you're not taking private kids out of public school and putting them into a private school. You're taking kids that are in private school and putting them into a public school. It's actually the exact opposite of what they're saying.
And you're converting your home into government property. Most people don't realize that when you take this on, because there's this whole legal principle. When you take this on, not only will the government exercise control over the education, they exercise control over your child. So by taking government money, you are not only saying, I will submit to whatever curriculum you want me to have, whether they're exercising that power or not, it's coming. We already know it's coming. It's coming in Texas by the demand of the people. So you'll take whatever curriculum you have. You're also telling the government that they have a fiduciary control over your child. They have a financial interest in your child because they're funding your child's education. Well, guess what? That means they have a fiduciary interest over the health of your child. You take government money, you're going to have to submit to whatever the healthcare demands are of the government. And if you don't submit to the healthcare demands of the government, guess what, Sweden? They're going to come and take your child. Tell you you're neglecting your children's health and you're engaging in child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, California already has laws like that around sexual identity and being able to destroy family rights. And so it is coming. It's coming to your state. I remember when Colorado voted for Bush +8, and now it's a deep blue state. I mean, if you're old enough, you'll remember California used to be a Republican state. So don't think that because you like your legislators today that your children and grandchildren are going to like them tomorrow. And I really do believe that we're just selling the next generation into a worse situation than we are today for a temporary financial relief. So, like, as a Christian, I want to end on here, like, you're a constitutional lawyer and you're a Christian. Like, what does the Bible say about whose responsibility is to educate the children, including like funding? Does God get jealous when we look to other entities to provide for us as Christians, people who believe that we're his sons and daughters?
Well, the Bible is very, very clear. The Bible tells us that our children are an inheritance from God. That means that our children are the greatest treasure next to salvation, obviously, that God has given us, and that we will be accountable to God one day about our children. And when we stand before God and God puts in our account, the account of our children, we're not going to be able to look at God and say, well, that was the public school who did that, or that was the government who did that. Even if the government establishes some kind of martial law that says your child has to come to public school. Now, my husband and I talked about this because you never know. We know history well enough. We never know when something like that might happen. And yes, our son is now gone and married, but we had decided a long time ago that if that ever happened, our son would never go. It just would not happen. We would die before we let him go into some kind of government custodial care like that. So God is very clear that the parent is the guardian, the owner of the child by inheritance. And God's laws of stewardship then apply to how we raise our children. The Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. God says, raise your children in the love and admonition of the Lord. And when you do that, these benefits will come to you. So the Christian parents have an obligation to raise their children in the love and admonition of the Lord, to raise them in biblical truth and in stewardship principles. Parents then have a duty of obedience to God, to look to God for provision, not government. Because the scripture does not say, seek ye first the government and its benefits. It says, seek ye first God and his righteousness. And so that's where it comes down to. We'll answer it one day as Christian parents. Did we run to Caesar or God? Because the reality is, and I know this comes off harsh. I've had people tell me this is harsh. I can't help you if it feels harsh. It's scriptural. The reality is God has made promises to us that he will provide not just for our needs, but for every need over and abundant of what we need, as long as we are obedient to his word. Now, you can say what you want, but when we stop relying on God and start relying on government, what we're actually saying is God is bankrupt and he needs a government bailout. And I'm not going to stand before God that day and hear what that servant from the parable of the talents heard, and that I'm a wicked, slothful servant. I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant, that day. So everybody has a different measure of faith. Everybody has a different measure of spiritualism. And that's between you and God. But for me and my house, we serve God. We don't serve government. And we stand with the apostles in Acts 5:29, and we will obey God over men.
Love it. So KrisAnneHall.com, I think is the website. How can people get a hold of you? Do you have any courses or anything that for students that people might want to send to really learn what our Constitution really is all about?
Yes, absolutely. So LibertyFirstSociety.com, all spelled out. LibertyFirstSociety.com is our online educational platform. We have homeschool curriculums. We have a la carte programs, all about American history, the Constitution, proper constitutional republic understanding. The things that I created because we homeschooled, and I got sick and tired of reading even the Christian homeschool curriculums that told lies about our Constitution, the role of government, what our founders meant for our government, what real history means. And so I wrote them myself. So I actually did a really cool thing this summer. I called it a constitutional deep dive. And I did, throughout the summer, I published 2 or 3 new courses every week where we walked through the Constitution itself from a short history through the preamble of the Constitution all the way line by line to Article 7. And so that is a really amazing resource. And one thing that I guarantee to all the people, because we have all ages of students. One of the things that I really am proud of is that what we do is we bring information at a level that even scholars learn, but even 6th graders understand. And so it's really, really great curriculum. And what we do is we rely only, and I'm pretty sure Classical Conversations, I mean, that's who you are. Everything that we teach relies on original source documents. So the only time I would ever deviate from an original source document is to show you why what we're doing today is contrary to what we're supposed to be doing.
That's awesome. I love it. I'm going to go check it out myself. I hope my listeners go check it out. And thank you so much for being on this School Choice Week series. It's so important that we stand up for our rights. And I loved, and it's something that I've said before, maybe I stole it from you, that our God is not bankrupt and he doesn't need a government bailout. So to our listeners, be sure to tune in all week. Go to wokenweaponize.com, pick up my new book that I co-wrote with Alex Newman as we go through the historical context of how government took over the educational system in the United States and how we've all been brainwashed by communist infiltrators. And as I always tell my audience now, don't be woke, but be wise. So share today's episode and tune in tomorrow for another exciting episode during the School Choice Week. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.